Well, all right. We take off through that bayou. Then...
Wait a minute. Who elected you leader of this outfit?
Well, Pete, I figured it should be the one with the capacity for abstract thought. But if that ain't the consensus view, then hell, let's put her to a vote.
Suits me. I'm voting for yours truly.
Well, I'm voting for yours truly, too.
Okay. I'm with you fellas.
3 convicts on the run from the law try to find a long-lost treasure. This week, we discuss cutting your hair with a Flowbee, how the KKK is like cheerleading camp, and what the Coen brothers have in common with fish. You won't be a man of constant sorrow when you find out if O Brother, Where Art Thou stands the test of time.
Test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? James says gladiator with a glut, and Alan says as a father blah blah. It's the test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? Test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Test of Time. My name is Alan Noah, and you, here on my video screen, who are you?
I'm James Brief, your podcast partner for over 231 episodes, which would make this episode 232.
Look at you doing math and stuff. Way to go. How you been there, James?
I've been doing well. So yeah, let's talk about the big news. Warner Brothers. First, they announced that they were going to release Wonder Woman 1984. And on Christmas Day, they were going to release it in theaters, and they were going to release it on HBO Max. Then there was the much bigger news that Warner Brothers basically said, you know what, fuck it. Like everything 2021, we're putting it all on HBO Max. We're not talking just Wonder Woman 84.
The biggest one is The Matrix 4, which is due in December of 2021. And I remember that the new Space Jam was on the list too. But there was a bunch more. I think there was like 20 some odd movies, if I recall.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's some movies I was really looking forward to seeing in the theater. For one thing, The Suicide Squad from James Gunn, that was going to be huge. Matrix 4, I mean, that's just something, you really want to see it in the theater. There's also Lin-Manuel Miranda's In the Heights, and it's a musical. I mean, it's meant to be seen with an audience. And Dune, that is a huge film that I was really looking forward to that because it's not meant to be seen on your iPhone.
Yeah, that's true. But Warner Brothers is taking a gamble. They're putting all of these movies into theaters and on HBO Max so that if you're comfortable, able, vaccinated at some point next year, you can go into a theater. Or if you'd rather, you can just stay at home and watch it on HBO Max. They're trying to get people to subscribe to HBO Max. You know, they're not putting a premium on these movies, not like with Mulan, there was that extra $30 fee. To be fair, HBO Max is kind of already at a premium price point. It costs more than Netflix and Prime and Disney Plus and those things, but their subscribers are lower than those other platforms, and they're really trying to bump up their numbers, and that's what this play is basically designed to do.
I mean, if you just look at these films, I mean, you got Matrix 4, that's got to be like a $200 million film. Space Jam 2, you're talking $75 million to $100 million to make that. Dune, another $100 million. Tom and Jerry, these are huge animated films. These cost tens of millions of dollars. Godzilla vs. Kong, that's another $100 million. All these movies together, just off the top of my head, this is $1 billion worth of films. So the big question is, will this be the thing that just kills theaters?
No way. I think all of these stories about like, this is the death of the movie theater are being greatly exaggerated. I think that once this pandemic is over, people are going to race back to theaters and see terrible movies that they never would have paid $20 to go see before, myself very much included. I think you are going to see some movie theaters that close, especially small theaters. Just here in my town, we lost like a local theater, like a mom and pop theater. That's not terribly surprising, and that's very unfortunate, and that sucks. But I think like the death of all movie theaters? No, come on. That's not going to happen. I don't think so.
I 100% agree with you, Al. And I don't necessarily think the pandemic will be over, but I think there's going to be some point in the post-vaccine release period that I think the public is going to be so excited about going out. And in the year or two after that, I think there's going to be a period where people are going to overcompensate, if you will, and people are going to be so happy to be in a theater and laugh and cheer and cry. But I think people are just going to want to be together. I mean, people are going to be doing a lot of things that they haven't done in a while just for the sake of being social. You know, people that haven't been to a ball game in 20 years and probably would not have gone in 2020 or any time this decade, they want to go. And people want to go to a concert that haven't gone. And they're actually going to want to go to a dance club that's wall-to-wall people that we used to maybe like you couldn't stand some parts of it. And kind of now I kind of want to go, you know, I kind of want to be in Times Square subway at 5 p.m. that if you squeeze yourself in, you kind of have to breathe in so that the door closes. You know, I think people are going to be so excited that I think theaters are going to have, the ones that survive are going to have, they're going to have the best years they've had in a decade.
Yeah, I think it's going to bounce back. But, you know, I have HBO Max and I liked the first Wonder Woman, so I am going to watch Wonder Woman 1984 this Christmas break. For a movie like The Matrix 4, by the time that comes out next December, hopefully I'll be able, ready, willing, comfortable to see that in the theater. Maybe I will, maybe I won't, depending on the buzz. But a movie like Space Jam next summer, yeah, I'll probably see that at home. I feel weird making predictions about what will happen in 2021 because who the hell knows? But my honest belief is that movie theaters are not going to all be gone. Some will go out of business, which is very, very sad. But I'm looking forward to the day when I can go back to a movie theater.
Oh, absolutely. And I have to say that one thing that the home theater, no matter how big the screen is, no matter what, comedies are a better experience with an audience. You're paying for the experience. You're not paying for especially good popcorn or M&Ms that cost 5 times the price. You're paying to be in that theater.
Right, exactly.
When people can be together, they're going to want to do it. So I think there's going to be a return to movies. And I don't think they're necessarily going to make $200 million budget films straight for streaming films. I think this is going to be an anomaly just because they had a couple of those in the bag.
Yes, I agree with that. But let's talk about a movie that was not a tentpole blockbuster, a smaller movie called Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
A modest film, if you will.
Sure. It's a Coen brothers movie, and listeners of the show know that I'm a sucker for anniversaries, and I saw, as I was doing my list of, 20th, 25th, 30th anniversaries, I saw that this movie was turning 20, and I got really excited to review it because I saw this movie once, not in the theaters, I'm pretty sure. I don't remember exactly when I saw it, but I remember that I really, really enjoyed it. I really liked the soundtrack, and I was like, yes, that is a movie I want to watch again. So a little just recap of the plot. It's about 3 convicts, Everett, Pete, and Delmar, who escaped from a chain gang in Mississippi during the Great Depression. They're on a journey to find a treasure that Everett buried before he went to prison. Along the way, they have a number of adventures, like they find religion, they encounter beautiful women, they change the course of Mississippi politics, they break up a KKK rally, and they even record a hit single. So this was not a blockbuster hit when it came out. It came out in December. Usually that's when the more artsy type movies that the studios think will get Oscar nominations will be released. I think a handful of Coen brothers movies have come out in December. But how did this movie do at the box office?
Well, this film had a $26 million budget. So, the Coen brothers were getting a decent budget for these films. And it's one of those films that opened slowly. It opened on a couple theaters on December 22nd in the year 2000. It got blown away by the competition that weekend. But it wound up limping on to $45 million domestically and $71 million worldwide. And it was a critically acclaimed film. George Clooney, he won the award for Best Actor at the Golden Globes and was nominated for 2 Oscars, Best Adapted Screenplay and Best Cinematography. And I think at the time, people were already trusting the kind of the marketing of a Coen Brothers film.
Right. I mean, they've been around for a while. There are many more Coen Brothers movies that we need to review on this podcast. The only one we've done so far is The Big Lebowski, I believe, right?
Yeah. And, they've done 18 films. And what do you think is their number one box office success ever? What do you think made the most money?
No Country for Old Men, maybe?
That's number two. When I say number one, you'll go, oh, okay. It was the debut film for a then young actress who became a pop superstar.
True Grit?
That's right. And I'm talking about Haley Steinfeld. Their top ones, True Grit, No Country for Old Men, Burn After Reading, and Intolerable Cruelty. Those are the four films that made over $100 million. So
interesting.
Yeah, George Clooney's he's in one of them. He's done 3 films with them. He did that film. He did Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Do you know the other one he did with them?
No.
There's a movie called Hail Caesar.
Oh, yes. I started watching that and then I fell asleep or got bored or something. I should give that movie another chance. But the Coen brothers use a lot of the same people over and over again. They have some favorites. I mean, even just from The Big Lebowski, in this movie, there's John Turturro and John Goodman. You have Holly Hunter in this movie, who was in Raising Arizona. So there are a couple of, their favorite actors that they use over and over again.
And they write these films. So I think they write them with, this is a Goodman role, a John Goodman role. And, we'll give this one to Turturro,
And apparently they had no second choice for the role of Everett. That had to be George Clooney, and George Clooney agreed to do it before he even read the script. And speaking of the script, this movie is sort of based upon the Odyssey by Homer, which I never read. I saw what I saw on Wikipedia about it. The fact that John Goodman's character has an eye patch that makes him supposed to be Cyclops or a Cyclops, but that's really all I remembered of the Odyssey comparisons. Did you ever read that, like in English class along the way?
I did. And when I saw that in the credits, I thought that was very interesting. I think I'd say it's loosely based on the Odyssey.
Yes.
I mean, there were a couple things I was specifically looking for, and one of them definitely happened straight out of the Odyssey. And the Odyssey is basically this guy Odysseus, and he's just returning from a war, and this is his adventure on the way back to Ithaca. And he goes through many adventures, every island he goes to, or sea monsters, etc., and he eventually makes his way home.
Right. And that is sort of the journey of Ulysses Everett McGill, who's the main character, and Odysseus is kind of transfers to Ulysses, even though everyone calls him Everett in the movie. And he's with his 2 friends, Pete and Delmar. They've escaped from a chain gang, and they are on their way to get a treasure that Everett buried long ago, and he escaped with these 2 guys. And I love right in the beginning of the movie, they're trying to catch up with a train, and Everett jumps on and he's talking to the other, I guess, hobos who are on the train, and he asks them for something, but he does not stop to help the other 2 men behind him, which is a problem because they are all chained together, and he immediately just gets dragged off of the train car, which I thought was a pretty funny gag. And then they find this push cart, like those old-timey things where someone's going on the train track and just kind of moving up and down this like seesaw thing. And the man who's pushing this push cart is blind, and he tells them what's going to happen. And even though I've never read the Odyssey, I was like, that seems like a thing that would happen in an old Greek story where there's a blind man who prophesizes what's going to happen to these characters.
Yeah, the guy basically says that they will find a fortune, but it's not the one you seek.
Right. And their first stop along the way is they go to Pete's cousin's house. He has tools that can break the chains, which he does. And they're asleep that night in the barn. But then the cousin turned them in to the sheriff for the reward money because, we didn't mention, this movie takes place in Mississippi in 1937, i.e. the Great Depression. So everyone's fallen on tough times, and the cousin is looking for the reward money. but his son helps them escape. At first, I didn't really remember if like the kid kind of joins them on their journey, but no, like right after the kid helps them escape by stealing the car, they drive off, and then the three guys are like, okay, get out of here, go on back home. And that's the end of the kid. We don't see him again.
No, but the boys, they go on in the car, and they eventually stop at a general store. And there's a great little scene because George Clooney's character, Everett, he's a real slick guy. Literally, he's always taking out his pocket comb and slicking back his hair. And he uses this stuff, this palm, which is like, it comes in like a little tin, and you put it in your hair, and he's always combing it. And he goes in, and he specifically wants something called Dapper Dan. And they only have another palm called Fop, and he's having this whole conversation. I don't want Fop, I want Dapper Dan. And meanwhile, there's cops around everything, and these guys are fugitives, and it's a silly thing to argue about, but he is very insistent on the palm that he uses in his hair.
Yeah, and it's a running gag that like every time he's startled awake, he wakes up and goes, oh, my hair. Like he's just very, very concerned about his hair. And George Clooney is very handsome, and he's got great hair. Although in real life, I don't know if you saw this just recently, there was a thing going around that he says he uses a Flowbee to cut his hair, and he's been doing that for decades. Did you see that?
That's amazing. No, but for people that don't really know what a Flowbee is, it's basically just a razor that you basically drag through your hair, and it gives you sort of a buzz cut.
Well, it's connected to the vacuum. It's like a vacuum attachment.
It's the suck cut from Wayne's World.
Exactly. And to be clear, George Clooney said that he's been doing this for decades. It is not just like it's a pandemic thing. Like he says he's been doing it for a long time. He's prone to practical jokes, so maybe that's not really true, but I did see the interview clip. He does say that's what he uses in real life. But then they encounter these religious people in the woods, and they're doing this like mass baptism.
You don't know that it's baptism. I haven't seen this film, and when I saw just these people in like white robes just walking past them and singing in harmony, I'm like, what the fuck did they just go into? And I was actually hoping this is not a dream or something like that. I really had no idea. It was a beautifully shot scene, and then you see that it's some kind of Depression-era baptism.
And the song that they're all singing is Down to the River to Pray, which is like a traditional hymn gospel song. On the soundtrack, it's sung by Alison Krauss. And we should take a minute to talk about the soundtrack because I love this soundtrack. I think it is phenomenal. There's a lot of just great songs. Talking about the awards that the movie won, the soundtrack won the Grammy for Album of the Year in 2002. The song I'm a Man of Constant Sorrow was a big hit as well, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But I think this is just a beautiful song. And Pete and Delmar in this moment decide, hey, we could be saved. We'll just go get baptized and then we won't be convicts anymore. And Everett's kind of like, yeah, that's not how it works.
Yeah, right. One last thing I want to say on the soundtrack is you mentioned Alison Krauss. If you just want something kind of new, just try her out.
She's phenomenal. I love her. Her cover of Baby Mine, that song from the Dumbo soundtrack, I think I've mentioned on the podcast before. It's phenomenal. Her album with Robert Plant is just like maybe one of my favorite albums possibly ever. That album was produced by T-Bone Burnett, who produced the soundtrack for this movie. He's produced a ton of great stuff. But yeah, Alison Krauss is amazing. Love her. Speaking of music, the guys then pick up a hitchhiker named Tommy Johnson. And the story with Tommy Johnson is he's waiting at a crossroads, and he says that he was at that crossroads because he made a pact with the devil. He sold his soul to the devil to learn how to play guitar. Now, do you know this story, James?
No, I've just seen enough Twilight Zone episodes to know about selling your soul to devils, and also Simpsons at Halloween episodes.
Right. Well, when I saw this, my first thought was about Robert Johnson, who was a guitar player who had a song called Crossroads, which is about a guy who sold his soul to the devil so that he could learn how to play guitar. At first, I thought the movie just changed the name from Robert Johnson to Tommy Johnson, but I went down a Wikipedia rabbit hole today. Apparently, Tommy Johnson is the guitar player from the 20s, 30s who actually claimed that he sold his soul. And Robert Johnson is a different guy, unrelated, just shared a common last name, but he turned that story into a song. And I'm guessing many people, I'm guessing you, James, haven't heard that song, Crossroads by Robert Johnson, but you probably have heard the Cream version of that song, which was a big hit for Cream. You know, going down to Rosedale, gonna take my now. But yeah, that's based on an actual real guitar player.
Is it based on the 1999 or 2000 Britney Spears film Crossroads by any chance?
Actually, it's funny that you mentioned that. No, of course it isn't.
Yeah. But speaking of brilliant musicians, the boys wind up stumbling upon a recording studio, and lo and behold, one of my favorite actors pops up, Stephen Root.
Haha, love him.
He's probably most famous for playing Milton in Office Space, the character who, you know, hey, where's my stapler? That guy. But he is fantastic in everything he does. And he usually does kind of comedic roles like in this one, but he was in Jordan Peele's Get Out. That is no comedy. King of the Hill, and he's a fantastic voice actor, and just everything he pops up in is great.
Barry.
I haven't seen that, but if he's in that, I'm excited.
He's great in Barry.
And I also love Henry Winkler, so I'll check that one out eventually. But what Stephen Root is in this film is he owns a studio, and he's looking for someone to sing some oldies songs. So the guys, after stumbling a little bit, changing their stories a little bit, they're like, oh, yeah, we're a band that sings oldies. They say this because he pays $10 per person. They wind up singing a song, I Am a Man of Constant Sorrow. It's an old bluegrass song that they sing.
Right. It's a traditional song. It is funny that they keep talking about old time music. Like this takes place in 1937, but they're like, you better not be singing any of that new stuff. We only like the old time music. I believe this song dates back to like the early 20th century. It's been sung by many people, Bob Dylan. There's a Joan Baez version, Girl of Constant Sorrow. Dwight Yoakam did a really good cover of it. But I love this song from this movie. It's the three main actors lip syncing. They don't actually sing it. It's sung by Dan Tyminski, who is in Alison Krauss's band, by the way, Union Station.
Yeah, and the boys wind up recording as the Soggy Bottom Boys, and they actually scam Stephen Root's character a little bit by pretending that there's a fifth member of their band.
Fifth and sixth.
And sixth, yeah. So they wind up getting $60 for their efforts. Little did they know that Stephen Root winds up actually just releasing this record, and it starts picking up an audience on the radio.
Right. Along the way, Tommy Johnson runs off when they have another encounter with the law. They meet a bank robber named George Nelson, who is also based on a real bank robber. His nickname was Babyface, which he hated. And the guys kind of just like go along with him. They rob a bank.
So they leave Babyface and they're driving down a foresty road. And this is the scene that I was waiting for from the Odyssey. When I heard that this film is based on the Odyssey, probably one of the best parts of the Odyssey. They're driving down the road and suddenly Delmar says, you have to stop the car. And they pull over to the side. They start hearing the most beautiful voices that they've ever heard. And they just run more and more through the woods. You don't know what they're running to. And suddenly they come upon this river. And there are three beautiful women singing a beautiful song in harmony. And this is the famous sirens scene of the Odyssey. And in the Odyssey, the sirens are these beautiful women on this island that they call the men over, and the men just come over. They want the beautiful women. It's really a monster and just kills them all. And Odysseus, he forces the men to tie him to the mast, and they have to plug their ears, and no matter how much he screams, they can't let him go. That's the only way they survive. However, in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, the boys encounter these beautiful women and they drug them. I love how they drug them. They give them what I would basically call, moonshine.
Yeah.
It's out of these jugs that like straight out of like a Looney Tunes cartoon. It actually says XXX on the jugs. It's fantastic.
Right, right. And then the aftermath of this scene is they all kind of pass out from all that moonshine, which makes sense. When they wake up, only Everett and Delmar are there. Pete is gone. His clothes are all laid out, and Delmar kind of goes over to the clothes, and a frog hops out. And Delmar is convinced that Pete has been turned into a frog. This was one of the few plot points of the movie that I actually remembered from however long ago when I saw this movie. We should mention that Delmar is played by Tim Blake Nelson, who we last saw in Heavyweights. And I told you when we recorded that episode that you should watch Watchmen on HBO because he's great in that. But he's also just great in this movie. And he just totally sells it, that he believes with all of his heart and soul, with every fiber of his being, that his friend Pete has been turned into a frog. Everett's kind of like, no, there's a scientific explanation, and he's kind of humoring him about it. But Delmar is just totally convinced.
Yeah, Everett, he's the intellectual, and Pete, he's the hothead, and Delmar, he's just not a smart man, but he's kind of sweet, and I even wonder what was his crime. I'll bet it's Depression era, and he probably robbed someone or something. I don't see him as a violent guy.
No, I think that's a fair guess.
Pete maybe was in jail for something violent.
I could see that. But Delmar's carrying the frog or the toad, whatever, doesn't matter. But he's carrying him around in a box, and they stop at a restaurant and they encounter John Goodman, who is this loud, boisterous Bible salesman, and he convinces them to get their meals to go, to pay for his meal, and he will share with them the secret to making money selling Bibles. But he just wants to rob them. He knocks them out with like a tree branch, and then he looks into the box with the frog in it. He's expecting that it's going to be filled with cash, but it's only the frog, and he's pissed. So in his anger, he squishes the frog. And as far as Delmar is concerned, he has killed Pete.
Right. Meanwhile, Pete is very much alive. It turns out the sirens turned him in for the reward money, and we're probably going to turn each of them in, but all three of them had to carry him one at a time, so the other boys woke up first. But another story, we've been meeting these two characters that are running for governor. Now, there's the incumbent, the current governor of Mississippi. He's Governor Pappy O'Daniel, and he's running against this reformer, Homer Stokes. And Homer, currently, he's winning. And, of course, Homer is probably a reference to the fact that the Odyssey is written by Homer.
Not so much as a reference as just using the name.
Right. Or maybe Homer Simpson, but you never
Maybe.
know. Eventually, Everett gets to his hometown, and he sees his daughters.
They're singing at this rally for Homer Stokes, and he's talking to them, and they're kind of like, wait, you can't be our daddy. Our daddy is dead. He got hit by a train. And he's like, clearly I did not get hit by a train. And then they lead him into a Woolworth where their mom is. Their mom is played by Holly Hunter. Her name is Penny in this movie. I think I saw on Wikipedia that there's a Penelope in the Odyssey. So I guess that's why this woman's named Penny. But Penny is now engaged to a new fella who Penny keeps saying is bona fide, meaning that he is respectable, he has money, he's going to take care of her and their 6 daughters, and Everett is furious. He challenges the fiance to a fight, and it's just kind of funny because you sort of expect that Everett's going to beat up that new guy. But no, the new guy just gets one solid punch in the face to Everett, and then another, and then another. And like, yeah, he just gets his ass kicked. The Woolworth manager or whatever, like throws him out and says, "You're not welcome at Woolworth anymore." There's a great line later when Delmar is telling Pete about what had happened to them. He's like, "We got thrown out of a Woolworth." Although I'm not sure if it was just that one location or all of the stores, which I thought was so damn funny. That like cracked me up.
Woolworth, even really before our time.
No, I had a Woolworth. I went to a Woolworth.
Yeah, I knew of Woolworth, but I never went to a Woolworth. But basically, it was one of the first massively successful chain stores in the United States. And throughout the 20th century, Woolworth was like the name that everyone knew. I thought that was hysterical, too, that line when he's worried that he might be banned from all Woolworth locations.
Right, which is a big deal because Woolworth is a big store. But then Everett and Delmar cross paths with Pete because Pete has been picked up by the authorities. He's back in a chain gang. All of these people in a chain gang come into a movie theater where Everett and Delmar are just watching a movie, and then all the prisoners come in. They watch the movie too. And Pete is telling them to not seek the treasure because when the authorities captured him, they convinced him to talk, and he told them where they were going, where the treasure was going to be. So he's just whispering, quote unquote, very loudly in the theater, "Do not seek the treasure." And later on, Everett and Delmar break Pete out of jail very easily, by the way. It seems like they just kind of walk into whatever room all these people are being kept in, break off the chains, and then leave. It's not like a exciting prison heist scene at all. It's just like, oh, we came to get you. Cool, thanks.
I was kind of thinking about that, and my backstory is that this town is very, very lax. I kept wondering, why are all of these prisoners in a movie theater? And I just had this idea that the sheriff showed up, and he either wanted an air-conditioned theater, he wanted to see the movie. I really doubt it was because he's a nice guy and wanted to give the prisoners, a movie. He probably just said to the ticket holder, like, "I'm bringing them in. I'm not paying 20 tickets. Like, you'll be lucky if I give you, a penny for all of them." But I also think that this jail is not really anything very serious. I think it's probably more like a house that has very little security, probably a sleeping guy there. And it's definitely just one person and certainly, no security of any kind.
I could see that. So after they've broken Pete out, they're talking about everything that happened. And Everett finally comes clean that there is no buried treasure. He did not go to jail for stealing from an armored car. He was arrested for practicing law without a license. He only said that there was a treasure to get these other two guys to come with him. And he kind of had to do that because they were on a chain gang. So they were chained together. And Pete is furious because he only had 2 weeks left on his sentence, but because he escaped, he's getting an additional 50 years. So he's well within his right to be furious about that.
I love when he says, "I'm not going to be released until 1987. It's so funny the way he says it. And he's going to get to be released for the release of some pretty good films in 1988.
Yeah. And then it's funny because Pete's like, "I'll be 84. And he's furious. And Delmar's like, "Oh, well, I'll only be 82. Like, good news for him.
It's really funny because I just love that Pete had 2 weeks left. Why would you break out? I guess he had the greedy idea of, getting a $500,000. I mean, there's one scene when they talk about what they're going to do with their treasure. And that Pete says he just wants to open a restaurant and be called Sir.
Yeah, it's sweet. But then the three guys happen upon a KKK rally. Who is also there, but their old friend Tommy Johnson, who is going to be lynched. Everett and Pete and Delmar decide, obviously, they have to rescue their friend Tommy. So they stage this bizarre plan, basically, where they beat up three guys and take their uniforms. Somehow, John Goodman's character recognizes them. He's also there. He's a member of the KKK rally.
Somehow, he recognized him because of the Dapper Dan. He sniffs. He can totally smell Dapper Dan.
Oh, right. I mean, surely other people must be using Dapper Dan, or maybe not because it's the Great Depression and only Everett cares that much.
Possibly, but look at the other people. No one is slicking their hair as much as Everett. No one in any scene. And I think that's also why the dogs are always able to find these guys.
That is true. You see the dog sniffing the cans. I also suppose that no one goes to a KKK rally with really nice hair because what's the point? You're wearing a hood,
Right. So John Goodman's character, Big Dan T, he decides to unmask these guys, but strangely, he unmasks himself and then unmasks the three guys. They basically go, run, and they run towards Tommy. They grab a Confederate flag and they hurl it at the crowd, and the crowd all stops because they have some rule the Confederate flag can never hit the ground.
I wonder if that's real.
I don't know. It makes these assholes seem even more ridiculous because the only thing that reminded me of is that movie Bring It On, where the cheerleading camp can't allow a stick to fall to the ground. And I'm like, the Ku Klux Klan is like a cheerleading camp and the spirit stick. Those people who are fans of Bring It On, they get that reference and they think that's damn funny. But in Oh Brother Where Art Thou, they're worried that the Confederate flag doesn't hit the ground. They stop in their tracks. Big Dan T catches the flag. While they're all distracted, the other guys, they were able to snap a cable and drop their big, stupid, fucking burning cross, and it falls down on John Goodman's character, presumably killing him because we don't see him again. So the four, the trio now, the quartet, the Soggy Bottom Boys back together, they all run out into the woods, and the Ku Klux Klan, they lose them. But one other thing that we find out from that rally is that the Grand Wizard, basically the leader of the Ku Klux Klan of that division, he's Homer Stokes, the guy who was running as the reformer candidate for governor.
Right. And then the Soggy Bottom Boys go to this political fundraising dinner
For Homer Stokes.
because Penny's fiance, he's the leader of Homer Stokes' campaign. So that's why Everett wants to go there so he can talk to Penny. And they get dressed up as musicians because they have musical acts at this fundraising dinner. And the incumbent governor is also there because he's trying to steal Penny's fiance to join his campaign. But while Everett's trying to talk to Penny, the other guys are just kind of pulled on stage and they start singing because they know how to sing. The first song they sing is In the Jailhouse Now, which is actually sung by Tim Blake Nelson, the actor who plays Delmar. That is his actual singing voice. But then they go into Man of Constant Sorrow, and the crowd goes insane because throughout the movie, this song is becoming more and more popular. No one knows who the Soggy Bottom Boys are. And then all of a sudden they're at this dinner, they're singing their big hit, and everyone's super excited. Except then Homer Stokes comes in and he's mad because these are the people who ruined his lynching. And he admits that he's the Grand Wizard of the KKK, and he admits that he likes lynching people. And the crowd doesn't like that. They don't like that he wants to arrest their favorite musical act. So the crowd immediately turns on Homer Stokes, and the incumbent governor, Pappy O'Daniel, he's smart. He reads the room. He jumps on stage and says, "Hey, I love these guys. Unlike that other guy, I'm going to pardon them because they're not going to do any crimes anymore. Are you, fellas?" And they're all like, "No, sir. No, we're not." And it's great for them. It's also great for Everett because Penny's fiance has now been outed as supporting this, KKK leader. So she breaks up with him, and they also put a button on the Babyface Nelson story as they're leaving because he's been caught by a posse. They're dragging him off to jail. And it seems like the movie's pretty much all said and done at this point, but not quite yet.
So the trio, they wind up going to Everett's home, and lo and behold, the sheriff is there. That's originally where Everett said his treasure was buried, and Pete, when we thought he was dead and he was turned in by the sirens to the authorities, he confessed everything about the treasure, but of course there was no treasure, but the sheriff wanted the treasure anyway, so the sheriff was waiting there.
Right. And they're going back there to find Penny's old wedding ring because that was the condition that Penny gave on taking Everett back. So that's why he's gone back to this house, and the sheriff's waiting there. The sheriff, by the way, fits Tommy's description of the devil, just like a white man with no eyes, and you don't really see his eyes because he's wearing these big, thick sunglasses. But I think it's supposed to be implied that the sheriff is the devil who Tommy sold his soul to. But he's gonna hang them, and they're like, no, you can't because we got pardoned. It was on the radio. And the sheriff's like, I don't have a radio. So they are about to be hanged. They're all praying. Even Everett, who had been very skeptical about religion earlier in the movie when Pete and Delmar were baptized, but then a flood comes and saves them. And this isn't a deus ex machina. They had been talking about the flood repeatedly throughout the movie because the story was they had to get to this buried treasure quickly before they were going to flood this valley, and that was what they were rushing for. That was why they had to break out of prison when they did. Of course, that wasn't really true. The actual deadline that Everett was working towards was Penny's wedding day, but this flood was in fact real. They were flooding the valley, and luckily they are not hanged because they are all saved by this flood.
Yeah, and there's a part where they burn a newspaper in the fire, and the front page burns to reveal a headline that says, "The Soggy Bottom Boys have a big hit, but who are they?" Before the front page burned, I actually read the front headline was something about the TVA, which was the Tennessee Valley Authority, and the TVA was coming in and doing lots of reforms in their area. It was a Reformation, Depression era, kind of an idea to bring the South and a lot of areas of rural United States into the 20th century and bring plumbing there and bring electricity. And there were a lot of hints. So I'm glad this was not a deus ex machina. You're exactly right.
Right. It had been very well established. One of the things that the blind man at the beginning had prophesized was that they would see a cow on a roof. And I was kind of waiting for that the whole movie. And it happens now in this scene with the flood. There's a cow stranded on a roof. And then there's just a little final scene with Everett and Penny and his 6 kids, and he gives her the ring that they found in the desk where Penny said it was going to be. Tommy was floating on this desk, but then Penny's like, "No, that's actually not my ring, so you better find the real one." And Everett's like, "But it's at the bottom of a lake now." And Penny's like, "That sounds like your problem." And they're all going to live happily ever after. Pete and Delmar are pardoned. They're going to live their lives now. So now that we've come to the end of the movie, James, I am going to ask you, do you think "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou" stands the test of time?
We talk about this a lot when it's a film in the past. Everything is 1937, Depression era, so there's nothing to nitpick there. Have you ever had skate? Now, it's a kind of a fish.
I know what it is. I don't believe so.
It's a lovely fish. And it's something, when I happen to come across it, it's lovely. I never go out and buy it myself at the supermarket. I never really go and say, "Let's find a good skate place tonight." But every once in a while, I happen across skate. I think every time I've tried it, I've gone, "This is good." And that kind of, to me, describes Joel and Ethan Coen films.
Okay.
By that, I mean, they're not my cup of tea, and that I've never gone out and seeked one. I've never gone and said, "Oh, a new Joel and Ethan Coen film is out. Nice, I'm going to see that." However, every time I've seen one, I've gone, "Bravo, sirs, that was a fine film." I don't see them again. When we reviewed Big Lebowski, I said to I think yours and Dom's horror that that was only the second time I'd ever seen the film, because I saw it in the theater once, I liked it, and I didn't see it again. I thought this film was a real good time. I had a real nice time watching it. I thought all the characters were funny. I laughed several times. I thought it was a real good hour and 45 minutes. It wasn't too long. It wasn't too short. The fact that it's based on the Odyssey is fun. I got to wait for a couple references that I even remembered, and they hit all the big ones. Everyone acted very well. The music was great. This film, I'd never seen it. It's 20 years old. It might as well be, 50 years old, or it could have been made today. It could be made in 20 years. I think it totally, in every method, stands the test of time. If you like fine films, you will enjoy this film. Well, what do you think, Al? Does this film stand the test of time?
Oh, absolutely. I really loved this movie. Like I say, I didn't remember a ton of it. I just remembered that I really liked it. I've been walking around singing "Man of Constant Sorrow" since I watched the movie. "You Are My Sunshine," "Keep on the Sunny Side," I've been humming. It's got a phenomenal soundtrack. The acting is so good. The writing is great. I love the dialogue. I love the pace of the dialogue. I love the rhythm of the dialogue. I love the words that they use. I love the way that George Clooney delivers everything. I love everyone in the cast. I think John Turturro and Tim Blake Nelson are amazing. The supporting cast is great. I just found this movie to be totally entertaining. I watched it the other morning. I got about half an hour into it, and then Courtney was like, hey, we're going to have breakfast. And I paused it, and I had breakfast with the family, and I really could have just been like, you know what? I'll watch the rest tonight or tomorrow or whatever. And I was like, no. I want to finish watching this movie. It grabbed me. It sucked me in. I very much enjoyed this movie, and yes, emphatically, it stands the test of time. I don't know if I'll say that about every Coen Brothers movie. I'm very enthusiastic in my love for The Big Lebowski, but we'll see about some of their other movies. I'm curious to revisit more of their work, as we keep going with the podcast. But Oh Brother, Where Art Thou definitely stands the test of time. So we agree on this one. Next week, we've got a very special guest coming on the show, my wife, Courtney Noah. She is going to join us to talk about a movie that is celebrating its 40th anniversary, 9 to 5. I've never seen it, which Courtney is mad at me about, so we're going to have to watch that movie together. But I'm looking forward to watching it and talking about it with Courtney and you too, James. So you don't want to miss that episode. Make sure you're subscribed on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, whatever platform you like, whatever podcast app you use. Just subscribe. Make sure you're talking to us at Test of Time Pod on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We love hearing from you. And we'll see you next time, everybody.
Bye.